welcome back to Gammelgården Museum in Scandia, Minnesota. My name is Lynn Blomstrand-Moratska. I'm working with Olivia Nienauber, and we're going to give you a very short tutorial on the two kinds of folk painting. One is Swedish and one is Norwegian, and they come from very different backgrounds. The Swedish one was developed in the 1700s to tell Bible stories to illiterate people. The Norwegian folk art, Rosemaling, comes out of the desire of the peasant class to decorate their furniture and their possessions with beautiful painting that hints at the carving of the higher class peoples, called Kurbits or doll painting. It developed in Dalarna, like the flat plane carvings and a lot of the other elaborate folk parts of the Swedish culture. This painting is an elegant example, newly made, but in the tradition of Kurbits or doll painting. This developed in Sweden in the 1700s by the State Church of Sweden. They needed to find a way to teach Bible stories to a basically illiterate population, and they hit on the idea of a picture. They also felt if the picture was set in the Sweden of that moment, it would draw people in to listen to the story, and they would remember it better and relate to the story of the faith. One of the first stories ever done in this new genre of painting was the story of Jonah. And you recall Jonah was reluctant to go to the city of Nineveh on God's behalf. And he tried to avoid the journey by taking a ship. Well, there was a terrible storm at sea. Poor Jonah got tossed into the drink, and there's the whale that swallowed him up, where he stayed for 3 days. After 3 days, he was spit up on dry land. And there was no shade, there was no food, there was nothing. Jonah was grateful to be out of the whale, but he was also very unhappy with God, and he told him so. There's no shade, there's no food, there's nothing here for me. God had pity on Jonah and caused a plant to grow overnight to shelter him. In Hebrew, the word was kurbits. It meant gourd. And for the Swedes, they had no idea what a gourd plant was. So they invented it. And it's presented over here on the corner. It's enormous. It's huge. It has multiple leaves, fanciful flowers, seed pods. It's remarkable. And it's an example of what God can do, the remarkable and the unimaginable. The rest of the painting shows a harbor that people would recognize with houses that looked like 17th century Sweden. It was a huge success. And the church pointed to the Kurbits in the corner and reminded people, look what God can do. He will provide for you. And that was the basic lesson they wanted the people of Sweden to understand. Look what God can do. He will provide for you. More and more paintings were done in this period, and pretty soon it became very popular. They were usually painted on linen and kind of used like wallpaper in the church buildings. And then other people said, well, I'd like one of those in my house or the state office buildings, whatever. So the style of painting was set and always featured this enormous plant with rich flowers, multiple leaves, seed pods, to remind people of, look what God can do. And pretty soon that became an expression of folk art on its own right. When you look at a piece of Scandinavian folk painting, there's two very distinct kinds. The Swedish kind, called Kurbits, which was developed by the church to tell biblical stories to an illiterate population. And then there's the Norwegian painting, known as Rosemaling, which loosely translates as rose painting. And this was developed in the folk culture to embellish their home, their furniture, their possessions with paint rather than the carving of the higher class people. This came out of the peasant class. Norway is divided by deep fjord areas, so each fjord area developed their own style of Rosemaling. You have Telemark, you have Hardanger, there's all kinds of them. It's more floral, it flows more, it has more of the special line work on it. This particular painting shows a nice shaggy reindeer talking with a tomte, and it's embellished with the Rosemaling in the background.